Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is the topic of the truth about Russia. So for this video, I'm going to discuss the truth about Russia when it, of course, relates to Russia, in terms of the Ukraine-Russian war that's going on right now. So that is what I will be discussing today, you know, when it comes to, of course, the war that's going on, when it comes to whatever about Russia, as well as a life lesson that people can learn from a situation as a whole. Okay, so you, the person watching this, can learn this lesson so you can apply it to your life, so you don't make this a certain mistake that can obviously cost you. So that's what I'll be discussing today. So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the topic of the lesson, or like when it comes to the truth about Russia, in that regards, at least when it comes to the truth about Russia, it shows you just because a lot of people say something doesn't mean it's true. Because the truth of the matter is, when it comes to the Ukraine-Russian war, let alone Russia in general as a whole, more like for the past 10 plus years, there's been so much hype about Russia. Everybody used to talk so highly about Russia, whether it could be things like Russia is this amazing country, they are tough people, Russians are crazy, Russians this, Russians that, speaking positive about them, they don't take shit from anyone, in Russia type jokes, which are pretty much based off of Chuck Norris jokes, type of stuff, and of course all the hype around Vladimir Putin, not only being a badass, but being a genius, and all that type of stuff, as well as the propaganda they used to put all the time online, talking about how Russian military is so great, and all this type of shit. Just before the Ukraine war, I remember I used to hear it all the time. I still thought it was ridiculous. Americans are wussies now. They're not tough and strong like Russians. They're fanboys who just like, their military at least, just like women, blah, 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 blah. And here's this country that talked the most amount of shit, okay? And it's even after, since the fall of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, in other words, they were considered, and still are considered, one of the most powerful nations on the face of the planet. Literally, for crying out loud, with all this money, all this power, and all these people, over 100 million plus people, losing to a country that is considered one of the, if not the most poorest country in Europe, okay? Which in of itself shows that there's a difference between talking and doing. And more specifically, just because a lot of people say something does not necessarily mean it's true, okay? Because the thing is, even though a lot of people say, well, the Ukraine suffered a lot of losses too. They had a lot of people get killed too, and blah, 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 blah. And yes, I'm not denying that. Ukrainians lost. But here's the thing, though. Ukraine is, as I said before, is one of the poorest, if not the poorest country in Europe, okay? And to think that a nation that prides itself as being a strong, tough nation literally lost to a nation that's considered one of the poorest in the face of the planet shows that they're not really as powerful and strong as they made themselves out to be, okay? And that's the honest truth of the matter when it comes to Russia, okay? And all the hype people put them up on the internet and stuff, with some of them actually not even being Russian trolls, just being Americans and people from all over the world, or the Russian diaspora, whatever, you get the point, not people directly from Russia. The truth of the matter is, to think that a nation as powerful as Russia, okay, at least economically, literally considered one of the top 10 richest countries in the world, and in some ways is still considered a superpower, because a lot of nations in the world are allies of Russia. The world pretty much is already proven, is literally divided into two main camps: nations that are allies of America and nations that are allies of Russia, which shows that the Cold War never truly ended as much as we think it is, because obviously you already know the story. Europe, Canada, most of Latin America, yada yada, are all allies of America. Iran, China, are considered allies, of course, of Russia. So Russia is still considered very powerful in that sense. And these countries, and for a country that's considered literally the second most powerful in terms of influence, literally on the face of the planet, to literally lose to a nation that has a lot of people who require a lot, can't even access basic necessities that us here in like Canada can access to. Like this is a white nation, a white European nation. Not trying to say white people are superior in any way, but I'm saying it's a white European nation. You assume they have a lot, but some of them are broke as hell, and they still put up a fight against a nation as powerful as Russia. And especially with the fact that a lot of their people who have who are fighting in the war have very basic minimal training. So my point is, how can you talk shit about Ukraine when you literally, for crying out loud, are losing to a nation that might, yes, it might be poor, and yes, it might have a lot of casualties, but you're literally a nation that's supposed to be a superpower, a very powerful nation, and you're losing to a country that barely has enough money to even keep itself going on a day-to-day basis. I think that makes sense. And that's the point I'm trying to get here, okay? Which, the fact that Russia is losing to such a poor nation is extremely embarrassing, no matter how you look at it. Even if Ukraine has slightly more casualties, it doesn't matter. Russia, for crying out loud, is supposed to be the second most powerful nation, specifically militarily on the planet, and they're losing a nation that supports them in Europe, if not one of the poorest in Europe, and it's literally had over 1 million casualties, which is actually surprising. This is actually happening in this century, because that's not like something that would have happened during World War One, let alone World War Two. Even if you were to tell people in the 1950s or like 1960s, 1970s that 1 million people died, especially for a nation as developed as Russia, people think, what the fuck are you talking about? That doesn't happen anymore. That's some World War II type shit. And guess what? It's happening now in 2020, in the 2020s, for crying out loud. Okay? And that's what I'm trying to say here. So what exactly are you talking about? Like, no matter how you look at it, Russia embarrassed themselves. And it just shows you the dangers of the internet. Because a lot of people on the internet, especially younger people, of course, are surprised, they're more impressionable, they're more likely to hear something and believe it, go on the internet, and will hear something, and just because they see a lot of people in the comment section say something, not only do they think they might represent what the most majority of people think, which is actually not true at all, but not only that, but they get an impression that so many people are saying it must be right, okay? And this is the danger of the internet. A lot of people hear things and they start believing it because a lot of people say it, but it's not necessarily based on truth, okay? There's many instances of a lot of people saying something compared to a smaller portion of people, and the majority of people were wrong, okay? So even in playing devil's advocate for the majority of people actually believe this stuff, a lot of these people on the internet say, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And that is the truth about the internet, okay? Just because a lot of people say something does not necessarily mean it's true. Just because the majority of people say something does not mean they're right on everything, for that matter. Let alone, not only are they not necessarily right, it doesn't mean that they really have much power. But since we look at the world, it's always been a very small percentage of the population of the world that actually made anything happen, for that matter. It's like, look at the Nazis. Only like 5% of Germans were actually Nazis. And look at how much damage they caused to the world. Not saying the Nazis were good people, they were evil people. Well, my point is that just because a lot of people say something, the masses don't always have power over everything. But anyway, the point of the matter is, I'm trying to get at here, is that just because a lot of people say something doesn't mean they're right. And that is a good lesson to learn from this Russian conflict. Because if you told people, like it's not even 2020, we're going back to 2019 and beyond, that Ukraine will put up a good fight, and people would laugh in your fucking face. And look at what's happening now. And that's the truth. So that's a lesson that there is to learn. Just because a lot of people on the internet say something does not necessarily mean it's true, okay? And it's not just about the Russian-Ukraine conflict that obviously there's a lesson learned here. It's for anything in life, okay? Whether it could be all these demographics of people online, like feminists, which are actually not a representation of real feminism. Feminism decades ago was way different from the feminism now, which is pretty much made up of a bunch of dykes who just talk shit on men. and say, well, we don't need men. I have the bare instead of the male, and blah 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 blah, or just all these demographics of people who talk shit about another group of people, or it can even just people who have certain views and opinions that are actually just well done, and they talk down on anyone who disagrees slightly. This situation just shows you just because a lot of people say something doesn't mean it's true. Okay, so that is the honest truth here. So that is what I have to say for this video. And the ultimate lesson is that just because a lot of people say something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So don't, just because a lot of people say something, believe it. Okay? And more specifically, don't be intimidated by other people just because a lot of people say something. Okay? Have your own opinions and have your own views. But just like a lot of people talk shit about this and that, and look at what happens, they lose, just like Russia lost. And that is the truth. So anyway, that's all I have to say, and I'm out. Bye.